Eliza Monroe heard her father sell her like a mule at auction, standing 6 feet away, dish towel still wet in her hands, listening to him tell a stranger she was plain, obedient, and nobody else wanted her. He didn't lower his voice. He didn't look at her face. He said she ain't much to look at, the way a man describes a broken fence post he's trying to unload before winter. She was 25 years old. She set the dish towel down. She walked into that parlor, and she looked the stranger dead in the eye and said, "I heard every word. If this story already has you, don't move. Subscribe to this channel right now and hit that bell so you never miss a single story we tell here. Drop your city in the comments. I read everyone, and I want to see how far this story travels. Now stay with me, because what happens next will change everything you thought you knew about this woman." She had been standing in the hallway for 4 minutes before her father said the worst of it. Eliza knew because she counted. She had learned to count things when she was young. Seconds. Footsteps, the number of times a cruel word was said before it stopped surprising her. Counting gave her something to hold on to when everything else slipped. So she stood with her back flat against the hallway wall, and she counted, and she listened to her father describe her to a stranger through a 1/4 inch of pine board. "She ain't much to look at," her father said, "but she works hard. That's worth something to a man in your situation." Silence from the stranger. "Her younger sisters have prospects," her father continued. "Eliza does not, never has, but she's capable, obedient. She won't give you trouble." Eliza's hands were still holding the dish towel. She looked down at them. They were shaking. She pressed them flat against her thighs and made them stop. She was 25 years old. She had managed this household since she was 14. The accounts, the garden, the larder, the mending, the negotiations with the feed supplier when her father's temper made him impossible to deal with. She had nursed her mother through 2 winters of sickness and buried her in the 3rd. She had repaired the Eastfield irrigation line last spring because nobody else in the family knew how. And her father had walked past the fixed line 3 days later without a word. Not once, not a single time in 11 years, had anyone in this house said thank you. And now her father was in the parlor selling her off to a stranger like surplus livestock before the frost came. She set the dish towel on the hallway table. She walked through the parlor doorway. Her brother Thomas was leaning in the kitchen entrance with his arms crossed and that expression on his face she had grown up on, dreading the one that said her suffering was a form of entertainment. Her younger sister Clara was sitting by the window pretending to do needlework, which meant she was listening to every word. The stranger was sitting across the table from her father. She had built a picture of him on the walk down the hall. Thick-necked, red-faced, the kind of man who took a woman like Eliza because no one better would have him either. A transaction between 2 people the world had passed over. Caleb Whitaker was none of those things. He was close to 40. Lean the way outdoor work makes a man lean, not slight. But stripped down to what was necessary, his face had lines that didn't come from age alone. And when she walked through that doorway, he stood up. Not her father, the stranger. He stood, and he looked at her, and he said, "Miss Monroe, I apologize for the manner of this introduction." Eliza looked at him for a half-second. Then she looked at her father. "How much of that did you hear?" her father asked. His voice had the particular flatness it got when he was calculating damage. "All of it," Eliza said, "including the part about my prospects." Thomas made a sound, that short exhale of amusement she had heard 10,000 times. "Don't embarrass yourself further," he said. "Man's doing you a charitable thing." Eliza did not look at Thomas. She looked at Caleb Whitaker. "Mr. Whitaker," she said, "before anything is decided, I have some questions." Her father shifted in his chair. Eliza Caleb held up one hand. Her father went quiet. That surprised her. Men didn't quiet her father, not in this house. "Ask them," Caleb said. "What happened to whoever managed your household before?" "My wife died," he said. 18 months ago. How old are your children?" "And 7. Boy and a girl." What is the actual condition of the ranch right now? He held her gaze. Honest answer, only kind I want. It's struggling, he said. I've been trying to run a cattle operation and raise 2 children alone, and I haven't been able to do all 3 at the same time. Something's always falling apart. What do you expect from whoever comes? Someone who can manage the house. Help with the children. Work alongside me on what the ranch needs. He paused. I want to be clear about something. I'm not looking to fill an empty chair. The work is real. I need someone who can actually do it. Eliza nodded once. My father told you I'm obedient and quiet. He didn't tell you I can read, write, and do figures better than either of my brothers. He didn't tell you I've managed this household's accounts for 11 years. He didn't tell you I repaired an irrigation line last spring that 3 grown men said was beyond fixing. She let that sit for exactly 1 second. I want to know if any of that matters to you, or if you only heard the first part. The parlor went very still. Her father's jaw tightened. Clara had stopped pretending to do needlework. Caleb Whitaker looked at her for a long moment, and then something happened that she had not expected. Not a smile, not quite, but the closest thing to one she would see from him for a long time. Those are the things that matter most, he said. Then I'll consider your situation, Eliza said. I'll give you my answer in the morning. She turned and walked back down the hall without looking at Thomas. She heard him behind her. Reckon she thinks she's negotiating, and then her father saying something low she couldn't catch. And then the sound of laughter from Clara. She went to her room and she closed the door, and she sat on the edge of the bed with her hands folded in her lap. She did not cry. She had learned long ago that crying in this house cost more than it gave back. But she sat very still, and she let herself feel for just a moment the full weight of what her father had said through that wall. Not the shock of it, she was past being shocked by him, but the particular exhaustion of being reduced again to a list of your own usefulness by the man who was supposed to have loved you first. She ain't much to look at, but she works. She breathed through it. Once, twice, then she opened the small chest at the foot of the bed and started to pack. She owned less than she'd realized. Some clothes, a small leather book her mother had pressed into her hands the last winter she was well enough to press anything. The household accounts ledger, her father's name on the cover, her handwriting on every page inside which she looked at for a long moment before deciding she was simply going to take it. 11 years of her labor were recorded in those pages. She had earned them. At the very bottom of the chest, she found what she was looking for. A small tin, the lid sealed with a strip of cloth. She had been filling it for 3 years, seeds from the kitchen garden, sorted and labeled in her own careful hand. She had been saving them against some future she couldn't name. She put the tin in the canvas sack on top of everything else. She sat back down on the bed. She was not deciding whether to go. She understood that she had already left this house in every way that mattered. The only question was whether she walked out on her own terms or got carried out on her father's. She had always known the answer to that. In the morning, she went down to breakfast and told her father she would go. He looked briefly relieved in the way of a man settling a debt. Don't embarrass us, he said. Thomas walked her out to the wagon. He walked her all the way out, because Thomas needed an audience for everything. And he waited until Caleb was close enough to hear before he said it. How long you reckon before he sends her back? Eliza put her own bag in the wagon bed. She climbed up herself. She did not answer Thomas. She did not look at him. She had did sometime in the night that she was done performing dignity for people who would never recognize it. Caleb finished checking the harness. He climbed up. He took the reins, and as he turned the horses out of the yard, without looking back, without raising his voice, he said quietly, I wouldn't put money on that. Thomas said something after them that the wind took. Eliza kept her eyes on the road ahead and her hands still in her lap. She waited until the house was out of sight. Then she exhaled slow. Controlled, the breath of someone who has been holding themselves together in a cold room for a very long time. You didn't have to say that, she told Caleb. Wasn't for your benefit, he said. Man needed a straight answer. She looked at him sideways. Practical, she said. Always, he said. They rode without talking for a while. The Montana morning spread itself wide and pale around them, that early autumn sky that goes on so long in every direction it makes everything underneath it feel sharp and specific by contrast. She had never been this far from the farm. The space felt strange. Not frightening. Strange the way a door feels when it's been opened from the inside for the first time. After a mile, Caleb said, "Your father, is he always that way?" "Always," she said. "Your brother?" He was quiet. "Then I'm sorry." For the way the whole thing was arranged. I sent a letter and didn't think carefully enough about what it looked like from your side. Eliza considered this. "Did you know what he was going to say about me?" "No," Caleb said. Flat and certain. She believed him. She wasn't entirely sure why. Possibly because he said it like a man correcting a record. Not constructing an excuse. "Well," she said. "Now you know what kind of man he is." "Yes," said Caleb. "Now I do." The ranch appeared after another 20 minutes. She had been building a picture of that too, and it confounded her the same way he had. Larger than she'd expected. The main house was solidly built, good bones under years of hard use. The barn needed serious work. The east fence line was patchy. Some sections recently mended, others badly neglected. The kitchen garden had been started well and then abandoned somewhere in the middle of the season. She could see what it had been meant to be. She was still looking at the garden when the front door burst open and a small girl came flying across the yard and stopped 4 feet from the wagon. Breathing hard, staring up at Eliza with dark, serious eyes. "Are you the lady?" she demanded. "I'm Eliza Monroe," Eliza said. The girl considered this. "I'm Lily, I'm 7. My brother says you won't last a week," she said it matter-of-factly. As if reporting weather. "I told him he don't know everything." Caleb climbed down. "Lily, let Miss Monroe get her feet on the ground." "I'm being friendly," Lily said. Deeply offended, Eliza climbed down and stood in front of the girl and looked at her straight on, not down at her. The way adults looked at children to remind them of the distance. But at her. "Your brother might be right," Eliza said. "But he might not. Let's wait and see." Lily thought this was a satisfactory answer. She nodded. "Noah's in the barn," she said. "He said he didn't want to come out." Caleb looked briefly at Eliza with something apologetic in it. "I'll introduce myself when he's ready," Eliza said. She followed Caleb inside and stood in the front room and looked at what a household becomes after 18 months without anyone at its center. She looked at it the way she had always looked at a problem, cataloging what was there. What was missing, what could be salvaged. She didn't feel daunted. She felt something she hadn't expected, something that took her a moment to name. She felt capable, not tolerated, not useful in the way her father meant useful. Capable in the way of a person looking at a real problem and knowing in her bones, without having to argue herself into it, that she knew how to solve it. "Room at the end of the hall," Caleb said. "It's yours." "Window faces east." She nodded. "What time do you usually eat supper?" "Haven't had a regular time in a while. 6 o'clock, she said. "Go do what needs doing. I'll have something on the table." He looked at her. That startled quality again, like a man who keeps expecting a different sentence and keeps getting this one. "You sure you don't want to, Mr. Whitaker?" she said. "I did not come here to rest," he nodded slowly. "Yes, ma'am." Lily materialized in the kitchen doorway the moment Caleb's boots hit the porch steps outside. She had apparently been waiting. "Can I help?" she asked. "Can you peel a potato?" Lily squared her small shoulders with extraordinary seriousness. "I can learn. Then come here, worked side by side for 2 hours. Lily was a focused learner, not the scattered energy of a bored child, but real attention. Real questions, the kind of curiosity that's been waiting for something worth pointing itself at. She asked about every step, Eliza answered every question without abbreviating. She was pressing the biscuit rounds when the back door opened and a boy filled the frame. 10 years old, his father's build already written into his posture. An expression that wanted to be harder than it was, the look of a child who has learned to show hurt as a wall. He looked at Eliza. He looked at his sister. He looked at the biscuits cooling on the cloth. "You're the one he brought," he said. "Eliza Monroe," she said. She did not stop working. "How long are you staying?" "Long enough to get a great deal done." From the look of things. She glanced up. "Your name is Noah." "How'd you know?" "Your father told me." "And because you carry yourself like a boy who's been the man of something for too long." She held his gaze. "That's too much weight for 10. His chin came up. "I'm fine." "I didn't say you weren't," she said. "I said it was heavy. There's a difference." He didn't answer that. He was working something over behind his eyes. "You're not like Mama was," he said finally. "No," Eliza said. "I'm not. I didn't know her. And I'm not trying to be." She set the last biscuit down and looked at him straight. "I'm not here to replace anyone, Noah. I'm here to do an honest job. That's all I'm offering. That's all I'm asking you to accept." He chewed on this for a moment. Then, almost despite himself, "The east fence has been coming down for a month." "Papa don't have time to fix it. I saw it riding in," Eliza said. "We'll get to it. You know how to fix fencing? I know how to follow a line and drive a nail." "I expect that covers most of it." She looked at him. "Do you?" Something moved across his face. "Yeah," he said. "I do, good," she said. "Then we'll do it together." He didn't smile. But the wall behind his eyes dropped half an inch. Supper at 6 was the first real meal in that kitchen in longer than anyone at the table wanted to say out loud. Stewed chicken, roasted root vegetables, biscuits. Caleb sat down and looked at the table the way a man looks at something he thought he'd lost and had stopped expecting to see again. Nobody spoke for the first few minutes. Then Noah said, without raising his eyes from his plate, "Biscuits are good." "Thank you," Eliza said. "Didn't say they were great." "I'll take it." Lily laughed a real laugh. Sudden and bright, the kind that surprises the person making it. Caleb pressed his lips together. Not quite a smile. But she noticed it. She filed it away. After the children were in bed, Caleb stood in the kitchen doorway while Eliza washed the last of the dishes. "You don't have to do that tonight," he said. "First day. You could leave it. I'd rather finish what I started." She handed a plate to the drying rack. "You wanted to ask me something earlier. On the road." He looked at her. "What makes you say that? You opened your mouth twice and changed your mind." Men who change their minds twice usually get there on the third try. A beat. "Then your father said you were quiet." "I am quiet," she said. Quiet isn't the same as unobservant. He almost smiled again. She was beginning to catalog the almost smiles. They told her more than the words did. "I wanted to ask," he said carefully, "why you agreed to come." "You didn't have to. You could have refused him." Eliza was quiet for a moment. She turned this over honestly. "Because refusing him would have meant staying," she said. "And staying would have meant spending the rest of my life being useful to people who would never once say thank you." She set the last dish on the rack. "You told me the work here was real, that it mattered. That's more than I've had in 11 years. She dried her hands. "That's why I came." Caleb said nothing for a long moment. "Miss Monroe," he said, "Mr. Whitaker, I think you may be the most honest person who's sat at that table in a long time." "Your wife sounds like she was honest too," Eliza said. "She was," he said quietly. "Good, kind of painful," Eliza said. "Yes," he said, "it was." She told him good night. She walked to the room at the end of the hall, the one with the east-facing window, and she sat on the edge of the bed in the dark, and she let the day settle through her. Her father's voice through the wall. "She ain't much to look at." "Noah, biscuits are good." Lily's laugh at the supper table, sudden and unguarded. The laugh of a child who had forgotten for a moment that she was supposed to be sad. Caleb standing up when she walked in the room. She lay back on the bed without taking off her boots and looked at the ceiling and thought about the tin of seeds at the bottom of her canvas sack. 3 years she had been collecting them, saving them for a future she couldn't name. She thought maybe she was beginning to be able to name it. Outside, the Montana wind moved through the dry grass, and the old house settled around her, not hostile. Not welcoming, just present, the way a place is present before it decides what it thinks of you. She was not going to rush it. She had learned patience the hard way, which was the only way it held. She closed her eyes. She was not happy yet. She was not certain of anything yet. But she was somewhere she had chosen to be, and that for the first time she could clearly remember was enough to sleep on. In the morning she woke before the sun and went to the kitchen and found Caleb already there, standing at the stove with his back to the door, and she could tell from the smell that the coffee was weak. She walked past him, picked up the tin, added half a measure more, and put it back. He watched her do this without speaking. "You always do that?" he asked. "Every kitchen I've ever worked in," she said. "Nobody makes it strong enough." A pause. "Eleanor used to say the same thing," he said. The name sat between them. Eliza didn't look away from it. "She sounds like a woman who knew her own mind," she said. "She did," Caleb said quietly, like a door opening just a crack. Eliza poured 2 cups. She handed one across. He took it. Their hands didn't touch. They stood on opposite sides of the kitchen in the thin gray light before the ranch woke up. And they drank their coffee, and neither of them spoke. And it was not awkward. It was the particular tits of 2 people who are still strangers and are also already fractionally less strange to each other than they were yesterday. Eliza looked out the east window. The sky above the hills was just beginning to go pale. She thought about the garden, the fence line, the barn roof she'd clocked as she rode in, the children sleeping upstairs, the accounts that needed auditing, the 100 things this place needed from someone who knew how to look at a problem and begin. She thought there is so much work to do, and for the first time in her life, that thought felt like a gift. The second morning came the way the first one had Eliza awake before the light. Coffee already stronger than Caleb would have made it. The kitchen holding the particular quiet of a house not yet decided on the day. But something was different. She felt it before she could name it. A small shift, like a floorboard that had settled overnight. The kitchen didn't feel borrowed anymore. It felt like a place she was beginning to understand. She was halfway through the breakfast biscuits when Noah appeared in the doorway. He was dressed already, boots on, hat in his hand. And he had the expression of someone who had rehearsed what he was going to say and was now uncertain whether to say it. "East fence," he said. "I know," Eliza said. "Papa's got to ride out to the north pasture this morning." 3 steers got through the gap in the night. Eliza flipped the first round of biscuits. "How big's the gap?" "Maybe 3. Do we have wire?" Noah blinked. "In the barn. But after breakfast," she said. "You'll show me where the posts are stored, and we'll take the wagon out." He stood there holding his hat. "You ever actually fixed fence before?" "I fixed irrigation line," she said. "Fence isn't harder. It's just heavier." She glanced at him. "Unless you'd rather wait for your father to have time." He put his hat on. "No, ma'am." She heard it, the ma'am, and she did not make a thing of it. She just turned back to the biscuits. Caleb came in from the barn before she'd finished plating breakfast, his face carrying the particular set of a man who has already had a difficult morning and is bracing for the rest of it. He stopped when he saw the table. He stopped the way he'd stopped the night before that half second of stillness, like a man who keeps being surprised by the same thing. 3 steers in the north corner," Eliza said, handing him a plate. "Noah and I will take the wagon to the east fence after breakfast." Caleb took the plate. "You don't have to. Noah knows where the wire is," she said. "We'll have it done before noon." Caleb looked at his son. Noah looked at his plate with the focused attention of someone not wanting to be asked anything. "All right," Caleb said. He ate. He was gone again inside 15 minutes. Back out to chase 3 steers he didn't have time to be chasing. And Eliza watched him go and thought about a man trying to hold 4 things with 2 hands and dropping all of them just a little. All the time, every day. She washed the breakfast dishes. She got Noah and they took the wagon to the east fence. It was worse than 2 posts down. It was worse than 3. A full 8-foot section had collapsed completely. The wire tangled in on itself, the posts rotted through at the ground. She stood and looked at it, without saying anything. Noah stood beside her with his arms crossed, waiting for her to be discouraged. She wasn't discouraged. She pulled on her work gloves. "You know how to pull wire without cutting yourself?" she asked. "Yeah," he said. "Good. Start on that end. I'll start here. We'll meet in the middle and see what's salvageable." He stared at her. "You're really going to do this," he said. "I'm really going to do this," she said. "And so are you. Let's move." They worked for 3 hours. The wire fought them. The ground was harder than it looked. One of the replacement posts they'd brought wasn't the right diameter, and Noah had to ride back to the barn for another one, while Eliza held the section steady by hand. Braced against it in the cold morning air, not letting go. When he came back and saw her still there, still holding it, something shifted in his face that he covered quickly by jumping down from the horse and getting to work. By mid-morning they had 6 feet of new fence, standing clean and solid. Eliza drove the last staple and stepped back. Noah ran his hand along the wire. Testing it. The way you test something you're surprised is actually true. "It's good," he said. She agreed. He looked at her sideways. "You got a blister on your left hand." "I know. You should have worn better gloves." "I should have," she said. "I'll get better gloves." He almost said something else. She could see it happening behind his eyes, some door opening a crack and then reconsidering. He closed it again, but the crack stayed. On the ride back he sat beside her on the wagon seat instead of in the bed, which is where he'd ridden out. She didn't comment on it. She just drove. After a mile he said Mama used to sing when she worked. "Did she have a good voice?" "Not really," he said. Then, quickly, like he wanted to take it back, "But we liked it anyway." Eliza kept her eyes on the road. "What did she sing?" "Old hymns mostly. Sometimes things she made up." He was quiet for a moment. "Lily doesn't remember the words anymore. She pretends she does. But she doesn't." Eliza said nothing. She let it sit the way something needs to sit before you touch it. "7's young to lose a mother," she said finally. 10 ain't much better," he said. And then he looked like he wished he hadn't said it. Because saying it made it real, and being real made it hurt in a way that being angry about it didn't. "No," Eliza said. "It ain't." They rode the rest of the way in silence. But it was a different silence than before. The days after that fell into a rhythm. And rhythm, Eliza had learned, was the thing that held people together when everything else was in pieces. She was up before dawn. Coffee, breakfast. She worked the mornings in the house, the organizational work that nobody had been doing. The slow excavation of a household that had been merely surviving. She inventoried the larder and made a list of what was needed. She found the household accounts such as they were. 3 ledgers in varying states of disaster, and sat with them 2 evenings running until she understood where the money was going and where it should have been going instead. On the 3rd morning she left the accounts open on the kitchen table when Caleb came in. He stopped when he saw them. "I should have warned you," he said. His voice had something careful in it. "It's not as bad as it looks," Eliza said. She sat down across from him. "You've been paying double on 2 feed accounts because nobody reconciled them after the merger with the Hargrove supplier. That's 2 years of overpayment. If you write to them, they owe you back." Caleb sat down slowly. "How much?" She turned the ledger and showed him the column. He looked at the number. He looked at her. "That can't be right." I checked it 3 times, she said. It's right. He leaned back in his chair and put both hands over his face. She watched him and did not say anything, because sometimes a man needs 30 seconds to absorb something before he can respond to it. And the kindest thing you can do is give him the 30 seconds. 2 years, he said, from behind his hands. 2 years, she said. He dropped his hands. His face had something raw in it. Eleanor handled the accounts. After she died, I kept paying what she'd set up and I didn't look closely enough. You were grieving, Eliza said. And you were doing 4 other things at the same time. That's not an excuse. No, she said. It's not, but it's a reason, and reasons matter. She closed the ledger. I'll draft the letter to Hargrove this week. You sign it. We'll see what comes back. He looked at her across the table. That look again, the one she'd started to recognize. The one that wasn't surprise exactly, but was something adjacent to it. Something that hadn't yet found its name. Why are you doing this? He asked. She met his eyes. Because it needs doing. That's not what I mean. She held his gaze for a moment. I know what you mean, she said. And the honest answer is that I spent 11 years doing work that mattered, and being told it didn't. I'd like to be somewhere the work counts for something. She stood up. That's all. She went back to the stove. After a moment, she heard him pick up the ledger. Heard him turning pages. Heard the sound of a man beginning to understand the shape of the hole he'd been in. She let him look. The letter to Hargrove went out that week. But something else happened first. Mrs. Garrity came calling. Eliza was in the kitchen garden resurrecting it inch by inch, pulling the dead growth out to see what had survived underneath when she heard the wagon come up the road. She straightened. A woman in her 60s, broad-shouldered and deliberate in her movements, climbed down from the seat and looked at Eliza with the kind of frank assessment that doesn't bother to disguise itself. You're the new one, Mrs. Garrity said. Eliza Monroe, Eliza said. Ruth Garrity. I tried to help out here for 3 months after Eleanor died. Couldn't manage it. She looked at the garden. You're doing something with that. Trying to, Eliza said. Ruth Garrity came closer and looked at the ground. What'd you plant here? Nothing yet. I'm finding out what's still alive from last season first. There's more than you'd think. The older woman made a sound that wasn't quite approval, but was in that vicinity. Eleanor had a good garden. She knew what she was doing. She paused. You from around here, Willow Creek? My father's the Monroe farm. East Side. Something crossed Ruth Garrity's face. A Reckig Monroe's girl. Yes, Eliza said. She watched the older woman's expression. Ruth looked at her steadily. I know your father, she said. Not well enough. She left what that meant alone. How are the children? Noah is cautious, Eliza said. Lily is not. Ruth Garrity laughed a real sudden laugh. Unexpected from a woman who wore her face so carefully. That's them exactly. She sobered. Working too hard. Sleeping too little. Starting to look at the accounts again. That's good, Ruth said. That's the best sign. She stayed for an hour. She drank the coffee Eliza made without commenting on the strength. She told Eliza about the root cellar's drainage problem, and the particular way the north kitchen window stuck in wet weather, and the fact that the barn cat, who appeared to have no name, had survived 3 Montana winters and had opinions about where she slept and would not be moved on the subject. When she left, she stopped at the wagon and turned back. Your father, she said, carefully. Did he tell you much about this situation before he sent you here? He told me what he thought was useful to him, Eliza said. Ruth Garrity looked at her for a long moment. You're not what I expected, she said. What did you expect, honestly? Someone who wouldn't last the month. She picked up the reins. I've been wrong before. Not often. She clicked to the horse. I'll come back next week. She came back the following Tuesday. And the Tuesday after that. And gradually, without either of them calling it anything. It became the way of things. Caleb evening. As Eliza was noting the Tuesday visit in the household calendar, she'd started keeping something to track what needed to happen when. The organizational skeleton a ranch needed to function, he said. You know she's not just being neighborly. I know, Eliza said. She's watching. She's watching to see if I'm worth watching, Eliza said. That's fair. She cared about this family before I got here. She kept writing. I'd rather have her watching than not. Caleb was quiet for a moment. Most people would find that uncomfortable. Most people are more worried about what others think of them than whether they're actually doing the work. She closed the calendar. I know the difference between scrutiny and suspicion. Mrs. Garrity is scrutinizing. That's not the same thing. He looked at her across the kitchen. Where'd you learn to think like that, he asked. Living with people who only scrutinize to find fault, she said. Teaches you to recognize when it's being done fairly. He was quiet again. That quiet he had that was different from silence active. Considering the quiet of a man who is still deciding something. The Hargrove letter came back, he said. She looked up. They're sending a bank draft, he said. The full amount. Interest included, the number sat between them. That's enough to repair the barn roof, Eliza said. Yes, he said, and re-fence the south pasture before winter. Yes, and still have something left. Yes, he said. And then, for the first time, he looked at her not with that startled expression, and not with the careful assessment of a man who is still reserving judgment, but with something clear and direct and unguarded. Thank you, he said. 2 words. Plain and direct, and without any of the inflation people put on thanks when they don't quite mean it. She said you're welcome, and meant that too, and they looked at each other across the kitchen, for one moment that was neither long nor short. Just precise, and then she went back to what she was doing. But something had changed. She felt it the way you feel a temperature drop, not dramatically. Not all at once, but in your skin, in the way the air moves differently. It was 3 weeks into her time at the ranch when the first real trouble came. She should have seen it coming. She knew her father. She knew how he thought about things, not in terms of people, but in terms of arrangements. And arrangements that didn't go the way he intended required correction. She was coming back from the barn with the morning milk when she saw the horse tied to the porch rail. A good horse, too good for a casual visitor. She recognized the saddle. Her brother Thomas was sitting on the porch steps. He stood up when he saw her. He had that smile on the one that was designed to look easy and wasn't. Morning, Eliza, he said. She walked past him to the porch. Thomas, nice place, he said, looking around. Bigger than I expect. What do you want? Father sent me. I assumed. She stopped with her hand on the door. What does he want? Thomas took his hat off and held it in front of him. It was a gesture she'd seen him use before when he was about to say something he expected pushback on and was preparing to look reasonable. He wants you to come home. I have a home, she said. Eliza. His voice dropped to that particular register, the one he used when he wanted to sound like he was looking out for her. She had never once, in 25 years, been fooled by it. This isn't father thinks you're making yourself look foolish. Running somebody else's household, doing ranch work, fixing their fence, she said. Managing their accounts, getting back 2 years of overpayments from a supplier. She looked at him steadily. What did father actually send you to say? Thomas glanced at the door. Is Whitaker here? He's on the ranch somewhere. I'm not here to translate. Say what you came to say. His jaw tightened slightly. Father thinks there might be an arrangement worth discussing. Between him and Whitaker. Some business. And there it was. She'd wondered when it would come. Her father hadn't sent her here out of mercy or convenience. He'd sent her here because a struggling ranch 14 miles from town was an opportunity. And Henry Monroe never passed an opportunity. What kind of business, she said. Land, Thomas said. Father's been talking to some men in town. Investment situation. He thinks Whitaker might want to partner on some acreage that's coming available. What acreage? The Denton property. North of here. Eliza went very still. She knew the Denton property. She'd heard her father talking about it in whispers for 2 years. The Denton land sat between 3 other parcels, and whoever controlled it controlled the water access for all of them. It wasn't a partnership opportunity. It was a trap dressed up as one. "Does father own any of the Denton property?" she asked carefully. Thomas shrugged in the way that meant yes, but he wasn't going to say so. "He's got some interest in it. He thought Whitaker might want to as well. He thought Whitaker might want to put money into something. Father already has a stake in," Eliza said. "And he thought I'd be the one to introduce the idea." Thomas looked at her with something that was almost respect. "You always were quick. Go home, Thomas." "Eliza, tell father I said no." She opened the door. "And tell him if he has business with Mr. Whitaker, he can ride out here himself and conduct it like a man. Not send it in through a back channel. He's not going to like that." "I know," she said. "I stopped caring what he liked a long time ago. I just didn't have a place to do it from until now." She went inside and closed the door. She stood in the front room for a moment with her back against the door, the milk pail still in her hand, her heart going faster than she wanted it to. Not from fear, from anger. From the particular fury of realizing that even here, even 14 miles away, her father was still trying to use her as a piece in something that had nothing to do with her. She heard Thomas's horse move away from the porch. She listened until the hoofbeats faded. Then she went to the kitchen and put the milk down and stood at the window and made herself breathe slowly. She heard Caleb come in the back door an hour later. She had decided on her own, and without asking herself whether it was her place, that she was going to tell him everything. Not to protect herself, to protect him. Because Caleb Whitaker was a man too tired and too distracted to see a slow-moving thing coming. And the Denton land scheme was exactly the kind of thing that would take a struggling ranch from struggling to finished inside of a season. "My brother came this morning," she said. Caleb was washing his hands at the basin. He stilled. "What did he want?" "My father wants to bring you a business proposition." "Land deal, the Denton property north of here." Caleb turned around. His face had gone careful. "Denton property's been in dispute for years, I know," Eliza said. "My father has a stake in it. He wants to offer you a partnership that would actually put your money into something he already controls, tied to water access rights that he'd end up holding." Caleb was very still. "You're telling me this," he said. "Yes. Henry Monroe is your father." "Yes. And you're telling me this." She met his eyes directly. "I'm not his instrument, Mr. Whitaker. I never was. He thought I was, which is the same reason he thought sending me here was a simple arrangement." She paused. "If you want to send me home after hearing this, I understand. But I'd rather you have the information." The kitchen was quiet. Caleb pulled out a chair and sat down heavily at the table. He put both hands flat on the surface in front of him and looked at them for a long moment. "The Denton property," he said. "His name is on the deed?" "On part of it," she said. "He has partners. Men from town." "Which men?" She told him the names she'd heard whispered around the Monroe house over the past 2 years. She'd told him what she knew, and was careful to separate what she knew from what she suspected. Because there was a difference, and the difference mattered. Caleb listened to all of it without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a long time. "Your father sent you here to make me trust him," he said finally. "I don't think he thought it through that precisely," she said. "I think he sent me here because I was convenient. The scheme came later, when he saw the ranch was better than he expected. Because of what you've been doing here. Because the accounts are cleaner, and the fence is up, and the place doesn't look like it's failing anymore," she said. Yes, he looked at her across the table. "Eliza," he said. It was the first time he'd used her name without the "Miss" in front of it. She noticed. She kept her face still. "Yes," she said. "I'm not sending you home." She let out a breath she hadn't known she was holding. "Thank you," she said. "Don't thank me," he said. "You just saved this ranch from a mistake I would have walked straight into." He pressed his hands against the table and stood up. I'm going to ride into town this afternoon and have a quiet word with the land office about those deed records. I'll have supper ready when you're back, she said. He stopped at the doorway. Eliza, Mr. Whitaker, your father. He said it carefully, like a man feeling the edge of something. He doesn't know what you just did. No, she said. When he finds out, he'll come, she said. He always comes when a plan fails. He needs to understand why. She looked at Caleb steadily. Let him come. I'll be here. Something moved through Caleb's expression that she hadn't seen before. It took her a moment to identify it, because she hadn't seen it pointed in her direction in a very long time. It was respect, not gratitude, not the practical appreciation of a man who needs what you can do. The particular respect of a person who has watched another person do something genuinely difficult and has understood the cost of it. He nodded once. He went out. She stood in the kitchen alone and listened to his horse go down the road. And she put both hands flat on the table the way he had. And she breathed. That evening Noah came in from the barn and stopped when he saw her face. He was 10 years old and he missed nothing. Something happened, he said. Some family business, she said. Your family or ours? She looked at him. The question had landed sideways, ours. He hadn't seemed to notice he'd said it. Both, she said. Your father's handling it. Noah pulled out a chair and sat down across from her. He had an odd formality about him sometimes, this boy. A seriousness that sat on him like a coat slightly too big. Grown into it, but not all the way. Is he in trouble? Noah asked. Not anymore, Eliza said. He looked, because of you? She held his gaze. I told him something he needed to know. He's handling the rest himself. Noah thought about this. He nodded slowly, the nod of someone applying information to a picture they're building. You know what Lily asked me last night? He said. What? She asked me if you were going to stay. He looked at the table. She said she didn't want to get used to you and then have you leave like Mrs. Garrity did. The kitchen was very quiet. What did you tell her? Eliza asked. He met her eyes. I told her I didn't know. He paused. But I told her I thought you were different. She looked at this boy, who had been carrying too much for too long, and who had just, in his own clipped and careful way, told her that he was beginning to trust her. She did not make a large thing of it. Large things scared people like Noah. Small true things were safer. I'm not planning on going anywhere, she said. Planning ain't knowing, he said. No, she agreed. It ain't. But it's the best I've got right now, and I don't make promises I'm not sure I can keep. He seemed to weigh this seriously. Honest, he said. Always, she said. He pushed back from the table. He was almost at the door when he stopped and turned back. The south pasture fence, he said. The new wire we ordered. It came in on the Tuesday supply wagon. I know, she said. I've got it on the list. I figured, he said. And for just a moment, a single brief moment, something crossed his face that wasn't the wall, and wasn't the wariness, and wasn't the grief dressed up as anger. It was something younger, something that might in time become trust. Caleb came home after dark. Eliza had kept supper warm. She heard him on the porch, heard him in the hall, heard the sound of a man who had ridden into town to do something hard and had done it. He came into the kitchen and sat down without taking off his coat. She put the plate in front of him. He ate half of it before he spoke. The deed records, he said. There's more to the Denton situation than I knew. How much more? Your father's not just partnering. He's been acquiring quietly for 3 years. Small purchases. Different names, different counties. He's close to controlling the access to the creek that runs through 4 parts on this side of the valley. He set his fork down. Including mine. Eliza sat down across from him. If he controls the water, she said. He controls everything downstream, Caleb said. And he's been doing it piece by piece so nobody saw the whole picture. He looked at her. What did the land office say? Man, they're Jim Seltzers. Known him for years, he'd seen pieces of it but not put it together. He's going to look at the full chain of title in the morning. Caleb leaned back. This is bigger than a business proposition, Eliza. This is a scheme that's been running for 3 years. And you've been sitting in his house for 11 of them. I knew he was calculating, she said. I didn't know the scale of it. No, he said. How could you? She looked at her hands on the table. He used me to get close, she said. It wasn't a question. She was saying it out loud to make it real, the way you sometimes have to name a thing before you can deal with it. He thought he was, Caleb said. He was wrong. She looked up. He didn't count on you being the kind of person who tells the truth, Caleb said. His voice was steady and direct, no performance in it. That was his mistake, not yours. She held his gaze for a long moment. He's going to come, she said again. When this unravels. He's going to come here, I know, Caleb said. And he's going to say things. About me, about my being here. About what he thinks I owe him. I know, Caleb said again. Quieter, more certain. She studied his face in the kitchen lamplight. The lines of it. The tiredness that was different now than it had been 3 weeks ago still there. But the quality of it had changed. Less like a man who was losing, and more like a man who had finally found the edge of the problem and could see its actual shape. When he comes, she said, I'd like to be the one who answers him. Caleb looked at her for a long moment. Yes, ma'am, he said. She picked up his half-finished plate and brought it back warm. He ate the rest of it. And outside, somewhere on the road between this ranch and Willow Creek, Henry Monroe was going to wake up tomorrow morning and find out his plan had come apart. Eliza knew him well enough to know exactly what he would do. He would come, and for the first time in her life, she was ready. Henry Monroe arrived on a Thursday. Eliza knew he would come on a Thursday because her father conducted his important business midweek. Always never Mondays, which he considered unlucky. Never Fridays, which were too close to the weekend for serious men to take him seriously. Thursdays were his days for confrontation. She had grown up watching him choose his moments the way a card player chooses when to lay down his hand. She heard the wagon from the kitchen window, and she didn't move from the stove. Noah came in the back door at a run. There's a man coming up the road. 2 men. One of them's driving like he owns the place. I know who it is, Eliza said. Go find your father. Tell him Henry Monroe is here. Noah read her face. He went without asking questions, which told her more about how far he'd come in 3 weeks than anything he could have, she said. She heard the wagon stop. She heard boots on the porch steps. She heard her father's particular knock, 3 sharp raps. The knock of a man who expects a door to open for him. She opened it herself. Henry Monroe was 61 years old and looked like a man who had spent his life expecting the world to arrange itself around him and had mostly been right. He was dressed well. He always dressed well for confrontations. Behind him, standing half a step back, was Thomas. Hat in his hand, wearing the expression of a man who is at a fight he didn't start and isn't sure he wants to be at. Her father looked at her. He looked past her into the house. Eliza, he said. Father, she said. We need to talk, I assumed, she said. Come in. She stepped back. He came in. Thomas followed. She led them to the front room and did not offer them coffee, which her father noticed immediately, and which told him. She knew exactly where this conversation was going to go. Her father sat without being invited to. Thomas stood near the window. You went to the land office, her father said. Mr. Whitaker went to the land office, she said. I gave him information. He made his own decisions. You had no business, I had every business, she said. Her voice was level. She had practiced level for 25 years, and she was very good at it. You sent me here. I work for this household now. When someone attempts to defraud this household, it's directly my business. Her father's jaw tightened. Defraud is a strong word. It's the accurate word, she said. You've been acquiring Denton land parcels under different names for 3 years. You were going to offer Caleb a partnership that would have put his money under your control and given you leverage over his water access. That's fraud, father. Dressed up as opportunity, but fraud. Thomas shifted near the window. He was looking at the floor. You don't know what you're talking about, her father said. I know exactly what I'm talking about, Eliza said. I grew up listening to you. I know how you think about land and money and people. I know you better than you realize, which has always been your mistake where I'm concerned. He looked at her with something that was unfamiliar on his face. It took her a moment to identify it. He hadn't expected this. He had come here expecting the Eliza who left home 3 weeks ago careful. Contained, apologetic in the way of someone who has been told long enough that they are in the wrong, that they half believe it. He had not expected this woman standing in front of him with her hands still, and her voice flat, and her eyes clear. You've forgotten yourself, he said, but the certainty in it had slipped. Just slightly. No, she said, I've found myself. There's a difference. The front door opened. Caleb came in. He came in the way he came into most rooms without announcement. Without theater, just a man moving from one place to another. But he was taller than her father, and he moved with the particular economy of someone who has nothing to prove and therefore doesn't spend energy proving it. He looked at Henry Monroe. He looked at Thomas. He looked at Eliza. Mr. Monroe. He stood. He was recalculating. She could see it happening in real time. He'd expected to find Eliza alone. Or Eliza in a weakened position. Or at minimum Eliza in the kind of domestic role that would make her easy to diminish. None of those things were true, Mr. Whitaker, her father said. He arranged his face into the expression he used for business open. Reasonable, the face of a man who is only here to clear up a misunderstanding. I think there may have been some confusion about the Denton situation. I came to explain directly. Jim Sellers at the land office explained it fairly clearly, Caleb said. I don't think there's much confusion. Her father's face stiffened. Jim Sellers doesn't have the full picture. He has the deed chain, Caleb said. That's the picture that matters. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't move toward her father. He just stood in his own front room and looked at the man who had tried to maneuver him and said what was true without dressing it up. You've been buying Denton parcels under 3 different names. 2 of them trace back to business partners of yours. The 3rd traces back to a land company that your son-in-law incorporated in Helena 2 years ago. Thomas looked up sharply. He hadn't known Caleb had that piece, neither from her expression. Had her father. Where did you get that, her father said. Flatly, not a question. Helena has a land records office too, Caleb said. I wrote to them 2 days ago. Letter came back this morning. The room was very quiet. Her father turned and looked at Eliza with an expression she had never seen him direct at her before. It was the look he gave men who beat him at something. Pure cold assessment. You told him to write to Helena, he said. I told him what I knew, she said. He's a grown man. He made his own decisions about what to do with it. You don't know what you've done, her father said. His voice had dropped. When his voice dropped, it was more dangerous than when it rose. She knew that. She stood her ground anyway. I know exactly what I've done, she said. I protected the people I work for. You betrayed your family. You sold me, she said. The word landed in the room like something thrown hard against a wall. Thomas flinched. Her father didn't, but something behind his eyes shifted. You sat in the parlor, Eliza said. And you told a stranger I was plain and obedient, and nobody wanted me, and you described me like a broken piece of equipment you were trying to get off the property before winter. I was standing 6 feet away. She paused, not for effect. To make sure the words landed cleanly, you didn't lower your voice. You didn't look at my face. You sold me the way you'd sell a lame horse to a man who needed a horse badly enough not to ask too many questions. Her father opened his mouth. I'm not finished, she said. He closed it. I came here because I had nowhere else to go, and because staying meant the rest of my life being useful to people who would never once acknowledge it. That's the truth of it. And I made my peace with that. She looked at him steadily. But you sent me into this house with the intention of using me to get close to a man you planned to defraud. You thought I wouldn't see it. You thought I'd be too plain. Too quiet, too grateful for the arrangement to look carefully at what you were actually doing. She paused. That was your mistake. It's always been your mistake. You never once actually looked at me. The silence in that room was the kind that has weight. Thomas was looking at the floor. His jaw was tight. She could not tell what he was feeling, and for once she found she didn't particularly need to know. Her father looked at her for a long moment. You think he's going to keep you, he said. After this, when this is settled and you've served your purpose. You think he's going to. I think that's between Mr. Whitaker and myself, Eliza said. And it has nothing to do with you. You're my daughter. I'm a grown woman, she said. Who you placed in this house, and who is choosing to stay in this house. Those are the only facts that are relevant to you. Her father looked at Caleb. Caleb looked back at him. Your daughter, Caleb said, has done more for this ranch in 3 weeks than I managed alone in 18 months. She found 2 years of overpayments I didn't know I was making. She fixed fence alongside my son. She got my household accounts in order. She told me about your scheme when she didn't have to, knowing what it would cost her with you. He paused. She's not serving any purpose here. She's doing real work. And she'll stay as long as she wants to stay. Her father stared at him. You don't know her, he said. I'm learning, Caleb said. So far, I like what I'm learning. The front door opened again. Lily came in from wherever she'd been, stopped dead in the entrance to the front room. Looked at the two strangers, and then looked at Eliza with very wide eyes. Eliza, she said, are these men bothering you? The question was so direct and so absolutely characteristic of Lily that Thomas made a sound that was almost a laugh before he stopped it. Eliza looked at the 7-year-old standing in the doorway with her boots still muddy and her chin raised. It's all right, Lily, she said. This is my father and my brother. They were just leaving. She looked at her father. He looked at her. He looked at the little girl. He looked at Caleb. He picked up his hat from where he'd set it on the chair. This isn't finished, he said. Yes, Eliza said. It is. He left. Thomas paused at the door. He turned back. He looked at Eliza with an expression she had never quite seen on his face, something complicated and uncomfortable. The face of a man who is used to things going a certain way and has just watched them go a very different way. He believed it, you know, Thomas said, quietly, not loud enough for their father to hear from the porch. That you weren't, that you couldn't. He stopped. I believed it too. She looked at her brother. I know you did, she said. He put his hat on. He went out. She heard the wagon move away from the porch. She stood in the front room and listened until the sound of it faded. And then she let out a slow breath and put her hand on the back of the nearest chair to steady herself. Because her legs had been shaking for the last 5 minutes, and she had not allowed anyone to see it. Lily was immediately at her side. Did we win? Lily asked. Yes, Eliza said. Good, Lily said, and took her hand. But the story didn't end with her father's wagon disappearing down the road. And Eliza had known it wouldn't. Her father did not accept defeat the way other men did. He accepted it the way water accepts an obstacle he went around. The first sign came 4 days later. Ruth Garrity arrived on her usual Tuesday, but her face was different. She came in and sat down and put both hands around her coffee cup and said, There's talk in town. Eliza sat across from her. What kind of talk? The kind your father starts when he's been embarrassed. Ruth looked at her directly. He's telling people you deceived Caleb into accepting you. That you misrepresented yourself. That the arrangement was never proper. Eliza was quiet for a moment. What are people saying back? Mixed, Ruth said honestly. Some people know your father well enough to read between what he says. Some don't. Mabel Hutchins is repeating it. You know Mabel. Yes, Eliza said. Jim, Sellers at the land office told me he's been asked twice this week about the deed situation. Both times by men he didn't expect to be asking. Ruth set down her cup. Your father is working it from another angle. He can't get at Caleb directly now that the records are examined. So he's going after the social ground. Eliza understood immediately. Her father couldn't ruin Caleb's legal position, so he was going to ruin hers. If Eliza's reputation in Willow Creek became damaged enough, her presence here would become a liability rather than an asset. Caleb would face pressure to send her away, and without Eliza in the house, without the person who had uncovered the deed scheme, her father could slowly rebuild his approach from a different direction. It was elegant, in the cold way that her father's schemes were always elegant. I need to talk to Caleb, she said. She told him that evening. All of it, the way Ruth had laid it out, including the parts that were uncomfortable to say. She told him while she was making supper, because she had learned that difficult conversations went better when hands had something to do, and because Caleb Whitaker listened more carefully when the conversation felt like part of the ordinary work of the day rather than a formal presentation of bad news. He listened without interrupting. When she finished, he said, "What do you want to do?" The question startled her. Not what should we do, not what do you think I should do. What do you want to do? She turned from the stove and looked at him. I want to go to town, she said. This Sunday. I want to go to church and I want to be seen. And I want to let people draw their own conclusions from what they actually see instead of what my father tells them. Caleb nodded once. All right, you don't have to come with me. I'll come, he said. Simply, as if it weren't a significant thing. She turned back to the stove. People will talk, she said. People are already talking, he said. Let them talk about something true. Sunday came clear and cold. Eliza wore the best dress she'd brought, not fancy. She didn't have fancy, but clean and well-pressed, and the color of autumn leaves, which was a color that suited her in a way she'd never been allowed to acknowledge at home. She did her hair carefully, not for vanity, for the same reason you straighten your spine before a difficult conversation. They drove into town in Caleb's wagon. All four of them, Caleb. Eliza. Lily, because Lily had announced at breakfast that she was coming, and Noah had, after a moment's calculation, announced the same. Willow Creek's Sunday congregation gathered outside the church before the service the way it always did, clusters of people in the particular social arrangement of a small town where everyone knows everyone, and positions are maintained through 1,000 tiny signals. Eliza felt them notice her arrival. She had spent 25 years being practiced at this, the shift in a room when she entered, the subtle rearrangement of attention. She was good at feeling it and not showing that she felt it. Mabel Hutchins was near the church steps with 2 other women. She looked at Eliza with the particular expression of a woman who has been saying things and is now recalculating what to say next. Ruth Garrity appeared from nowhere, as Ruth Garrity tended to do, and materialized at Eliza's side. Morning, Ruth said. Morning, Eliza said. Mabel's already said some to Reverend Caldwell, Ruth said quietly. I don't know what, but he looked troubled when he came out. Eliza kept walking. The service was ordinary, but the afterward was not. Reverend Caldwell stopped her on the church steps as the congregation dispersed. He was a fair man, she had heard as much, but he was also a man who mediated between powerful people and had learned to be careful. Miss Monroe, he said. I wonder if I might have a word. Of course, she said. Caleb had stopped 2 steps behind her. He didn't move forward. He didn't move away. He just waited. There have been some concerns raised, Reverend Caldwell said. He had the look of a man who dislikes this errand and is performing it anyway. About the nature of the arrangement at the Whitaker Ranch. Some parishioners feel that a formal accounting of the situation might be. What specifically are the concerns? Eliza said. He adjusted his collar. Whether the arrangement is appropriate. Whether it is properly conducted. My father is spreading rumors that I deceived Mr. Whitaker, Eliza said plainly. She watched the Reverend's face. That's the concern. He looked briefly relieved that she'd said it, which meant he'd been dancing around it. Something like that, he said. The arrangement, Eliza said, is that I manage Mr. Whitaker's household, keep his accounts, work alongside his children, and do the practical work the ranch requires. Mr. Whitaker pays me a fair wage and provides room and board. That is the accounting. She paused. As for whether it's properly conducted, I'll let the people of this town make that judgment based on what they can actually observe. Which is a household that is running better than it has in 2 years, and 2 children who are eating well and doing their lessons. From somewhere to her left, Ruth Garrity said, clearly enough to carry, I've been visiting that house every Tuesday for 3 weeks. I'll vouch for everything she just said. Mabel Hutchins, from the other side of the steps, said, well, Ruth, you're hardly. I'm the person who's actually been there, Ruth said. Which is more than you can say. Reverend Caldwell looked between them. He looked at Eliza. He looked at Caleb, who was still standing 2 steps back. Still saying nothing, still simply present. I appreciate your candor, Miss Monroe, the Reverend said. And then more quietly, your father is a man who carries significant conviction about how things should be. Yes, Eliza said. He always has. The things he was convinced of about me turned out to be wrong. Some things he's convinced of about that land deal will turn out to be wrong as well. When they do, I imagine things will become clearer. She nodded to him. She stepped down from the steps. Lily appeared from the crowd and took her hand without asking. They walked back to the wagon. Caleb fell in beside her. He said nothing until they were clear of the churchyard, and the voices behind them had faded to a murmur. You handled that well, he said. I handled it honestly, she said. Whether that's well remains to be seen. He was quiet for a moment. How are you doing? The question landed differently than she expected. Not perfunctory, real. The way someone asks when they actually want to know. She thought about it honestly. I'm tired, she said. I'm tired of spending energy on my father's opinion of me. I've been doing it my whole life, and it takes up room that I'd rather use for something else. Then stop, he said. She looked at him. Stop spending it, he said. He's going to do what he does regardless of whether you respond to it. The people worth keeping will see clearly enough on their own. He held her gaze. The people who won't, you can't fix that with energy. She thought about this. That's easier said, she told him. Yes, he said. Most true things are. She almost smiled. She turned back to the road. The trouble came to its head on a Wednesday, 12 days after her father's visit. And it came from a direction she hadn't anticipated. She was in the barn with Noah, working through the early feeding, when a rider came fast up the road. She heard the hoofbeats before she saw the horse too fast for an ordinary call. The pace of someone bringing something urgent. It was Jim Sellers from the land office. He dismounted before the horse fully stopped, which told her everything about the urgency before he opened his mouth. He was looking for Caleb. She sent Noah to find him and stood in the barn doorway while Jim Sellers caught his breath. Bad news, he said. Tell me, she said. He looked at her. Apparently decided. Your father filed a petition this morning with the county court. He's claiming the Denton property acquisition chain contains a fraudulent transfer one that predates his involvement. He's asking for the whole chain to be frozen pending review. Eliza went very still. If the chain is frozen, she said, nobody can move anything, Jim said, including Caleb's North Pasture water rights, which trace through the same county recording system. Your father knows that. If those rights are frozen, Caleb can't legally access the creek through the north boundary. Not until the review is settled. How long would a review take? Jim's face told her before his words did. 6 months. Maybe 8. 6 months without clean north water access in a Montana ranch winter was not a legal problem. It was a survival problem. He can't win the petition, Eliza said. If the chain is clean, the petition doesn't need to win, Jim said. It just needs to be filed. Filed means frozen. It means he wins anyway, she said. Quietly, understanding her father's thinking completely. The way she'd always understood it when it was too late. He hadn't come here to win in court. He'd come to create enough legal uncertainty that the ranch's practical situation became untenable. He would file freeze delay and let the winter do the rest. Caleb came in from the south field at a run, Jim told him. Eliza watched Caleb's face as he heard it, the tightening. The recognition of how precisely calculated it was. The particular look of a man who has been outmaneuvered, not through strength but through patience. When was it filed? This morning. Before 8. Caleb looked at Eliza. She was already thinking. The Helena records, she said. The chain of title you got back from Helena. Does it show a clear transfer for your north boundary water rights independent of the Denton parcels? It shows a transfer, Caleb said. Whether it's independent, it needs to be independent, she said. If your water rights were recorded separately from the Denton chain, your father's petition can't touch them. The freeze only applies to the specific chain he named. Jim Sellers was quiet for a moment. Then she's right. If the recording numbers are separate, I have the Helena documents at the house, Caleb said. They went to the house. All three of them. Eliza spread the Helena documents on the kitchen table and went through them with the same systematic focus she'd applied to the household accounts. Not fast, but not wasted. Each document in order, each recording number checked. Noah came in and stood in the doorway. He looked at the papers. He looked at Eliza's face. He went to the stove and put the coffee on without being asked. It took 40 minutes. Eliza found it on the 14th document. A recording number that predated the Denton chain by 4 years. North boundary water rights, recorded separately, under Caleb's name directly, before any of the surrounding land arrangements had been made. She put her finger on the number, and she looked up at Jim Sellers. That's yours, Jim said. His voice had something in it. Relief, maybe, or the satisfaction of a man who had hoped for a particular thing and found it. That's completely separate from anything your father named in the petition. Caleb looked at the number. He looked at Eliza. How did you know to look for that? He asked. I didn't know, she said. I hoped. Your wife managed these accounts before she died. She was precise, I could tell that, from the household ledgers. A precise woman wouldn't have left the water rights tangled in a chain she didn't control. She looked at the document. Eleanor protected this years before any of this started. She just couldn't know that's what she was doing. The kitchen went quiet. Caleb looked at the document for a long moment. His jaw was tight. She could see him holding something back, grief, maybe. Or gratitude, or some combination that didn't have a clean name. Take the document to the county courthouse, Eliza said to Jim. File a response to the petition today, before close of business. Jim took the document. He was out the door within the minute. Noah set 3 cups of coffee on the table without saying a word. Caleb sat down. He put both hands around his cup. He looked at the table. My father built that ranch, he said. He spent 30 years building something worth leaving behind. I almost lost it in 18 months. He was quiet. And I almost lost it again this week to a man I should have seen coming from a mile away. You couldn't have seen it, Eliza said. You saw it. I grew up in his house, she said. I know how he moves. She looked at him. That's not wisdom. That's just experience I didn't choose. Caleb looked at her across the table. I owe you more than I know how to say, he said. You don't owe me anything, she said. I did what was right. That doesn't create a debt. He looked at her steadily. Something in his expression was different. Not the startled quality. Not the careful assessment. Not even the respect she'd seen before. Something deeper than all of those. Something that had been building for weeks and was just now finding its way to the surface. Eliza, she said gently, not today. There's still too much happening. He heard what she was really saying. He nodded. He picked up his coffee. Noah from across the table. looked between them with the eyes of a 10-year-old, who understood more than adults generally gave him credit for. He said nothing. He drank his coffee. Outside, Lily's voice came from the yard. She'd been sent outside during the document work, and had apparently found something to occupy herself with. Because she was singing, not well, but with absolute conviction. Eliza listened. It was an old hymn, slightly garbled in the words, recognizable in the tune. She looked at Caleb. "Yes," he said. His voice was rough. "That's one of Eleanor's." He closed his eyes for just a second. Opened them. "She doesn't remember the words right. But she remembers the tune. That's the most important part," Eliza said quietly. He looked at her. She held his gaze and did not look away. The petition her father filed was answered before close of business that Wednesday. The county clerk reviewed the recording numbers, confirmed the independence of Caleb's water rights, and declined to include them in the freeze order. Henry Monroe's petition was narrowed to the Denton parcels alone, which, without Caleb's involvement, meant it affected only parties who already knew what they were dealing with. Jim Seller sent word by Thursday morning. Caleb read the letter at the kitchen table while Eliza made breakfast, and the children argued gently about something upstairs. He read it twice. He set it down. "It's over," he said. "For now," she said. She cracked an egg over the pan. "My father will find another angle eventually." "Yes," Caleb said. "But not this one, and not this season." He folded the letter. "And this season is the one that mattered." She put a plate in front of him. He looked up at her. She had been in this house for 37 days. She had fixed fence and managed accounts and defended this family in a church doorway and spent 40 minutes on the kitchen table, finding a 14-year-old document that had saved a ranch. She had made biscuits and answered questions and held a section of fence upright alone in the cold while a 10-year-old boy rode for another post. She looked at this man sitting at the kitchen's table with a letter in his hands that said he was going to be all right. And she thought about the woman who had packed a tin of seeds against a future she couldn't name. She was beginning slowly to name it. "Eat your breakfast," she said, "before it gets cold." He almost smiled. She went back to the stove. And outside, Lily was still singing Eleanor's hymn in the yard. Still getting the words wrong. Still absolutely certain of the tune. The winter came early that year. It came the way Montana winters always came, not gradually. Not with warning, but overnight, the temperature dropping 40 degrees between sunset and sunrise. The ground going hard and the sky going white, and the whole world contracting to what you could hold on to with both hands. Eliza felt it coming the day before it arrived. Something in the air pressure. Something in the way the cattle moved in the late afternoon. Something she'd learned from years of watching weather the way a person watches a difficult neighbor closely, without letting them know you're watching. She spent the afternoon before the freeze, making sure the barn was sealed. The water lines were wrapped. The larder had what it needed. She did it without making a production of it, working through the list in her head the way she worked through everything methodically. Without panic, starting with what mattered most. Caleb found her in the barn at dusk, banking the heating source for the livestock. He stood in the doorway and looked at what she'd done and said, "You knew it was coming." "Yesterday afternoon," she said. "I didn't see it," he said. "You were dealing with the Hargrove payment," she said. "I was watching the cattle." He came in and helped her finish. They worked side by side in the dimming light without talking much. And it was the kind of not talking that had become its own language between them over the past 6 weeks. She'd noticed it developing the way you notice a path forming in a field not planned, just worn into existence by use. When they were done, he held the barn door for her. She walked through it and stopped and looked up at the sky. "There it is," she said. He looked up. The first snow was just beginning, not falling so much as appearing. The way the first snow always seemed to materialize from nothing. The air simply deciding to be white. "You ready for this?" he asked. "I've been ready since October," she said. He looked at her sideways. That look again, the one that had been changing slowly. Over the weeks, losing its startled quality and becoming something more deliberate. Something that knew what it was looking at. "I don't mean the winter," he said. She looked at him. He held her gaze for a moment, then looked back at the sky. "Supper," he said. "Before it gets dark," she went inside. But she stood at the kitchen window for a moment, before she lit the lamp, watching the snow begin to settle on the yard, and she thought about what he hadn't said, and what she hadn't answered, and the particular distance between those two things that was getting smaller every day. The children took the snow as a personal gift from the universe. Lily was out in it before breakfast, in her coat and boots with her hat sideways, making the kind of noise that only a 7-year-old who has just discovered fresh snow is capable of making. Noah went out after her, with the elaborately casual air of a 10-year-old who is not going to admit he wants to play but is going to play anyway. Eliza watched them from the window with her coffee and felt something move through her that she didn't immediately have a word for. Something warm and a little aching at the same time. The feeling of something you didn't know you wanted until you had it, and then couldn't imagine not having. Caleb came to stand beside her. They watched the children together without speaking. After a while, Lily fell down in the snow and lay there spread-eagled, staring up at the sky, laughing at nothing. Noah stood over her with his arms crossed, trying to look like he found this embarrassing. And then he fell down beside her deliberately and stared at the sky too. "She's going to want to do this every morning," Caleb said. "Yes," Eliza said. "Noah's going to pretend he's too old for it every morning." "Yes," Eliza said. "And then he's going to do it anyway." Caleb almost smiled. The almost smiles had been getting closer to actual smiles lately. She'd been noticing. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Ask. Do you miss your family?" She thought about it honestly. The way she tried to think about most things. "I miss the idea of them," she said. "The family I thought I had before I understood what I actually had." She looked at the children in the yard. "The real ones know I don't miss my father's house." She paused. "Does that make me a bad person?" "No," he said. "It makes you someone who's telling the truth." She looked at him. "I missed Eleanor every day for 18 months, he said. "I still do. But missing someone doesn't mean the situation was perfect." She would have said the same. He was quiet for a moment. She used to say that grief was love with nowhere to go. That the only cure was to find somewhere to put it. Eliza was quiet. She was wise, she said. "Often," he said. "Not always." "Nobody's wise always." "They're not. From outside." Lily's voice rose in a declaration that Noah had thrown snow at her intentionally, and this was an act of war requiring immediate retaliation. Noah's voice came back, denying everything with the absolute confidence of a boy who has done exactly what he is accused of. Caleb watched them, and for a moment, just a moment, his face went completely unguarded. All the caution and the careful management of himself just lifted. And underneath it was a man who loved his children with a ferocity that had been keeping him upright through everything. Eliza looked away. She gave him the moment. "I'll make breakfast," she said. The winter settled in, and the ranch settled with it. Into the particular rhythm of cold months, the earlier darkness. The heavier work, the way people draw closer together when the world outside the walls becomes hostile. Eliza had known difficult winters. She had never known a winter that felt like this one, where the difficulty was shared, and the sharing made it different. She and Caleb worked through the days side by side. Not always in the same place, there was too much to do for that, but in a coordination that had become so natural it barely needed discussion. She knew what he needed before he said it. He knew what she was managing before she reported it. The ranch ran the way a ranch ran when two capable people were tending it, and neither of them was spending energy on pretense. The children grew. Not just in inches, though. Lily grew visibly enough that her winter dress needed letting out by December, but in the less measurable ways. Noah started leaving his bedroom door open at night. Small thing, she noticed. She didn't say anything. Lily stopped asking every few days whether Eliza was going to leave. She had asked with such regularity, so automatically, that Eliza had gotten used to answering. When the questions stopped coming, it took a week before she realized it had stopped. The day she realized it, she stood in the kitchen for a moment and held the quiet of it. The question had stopped because Lily had stopped being afraid of the answer. Ruth Garrity came on her Tuesdays and brought news from town the way she brought everything directly. Without softening, with the editorial honesty of a woman who considered vagueness a form of dishonesty. The Denton petition, she said in December, was unraveling. Henry Monroe had miscalculated the strength of his deed chain, and the County Review was finding inconsistencies he hadn't anticipated. 2 of his business partners had quietly withdrawn their names. The man from Helena, the one whose land company had been incorporated to hold the 3rd parcel, had retained a lawyer. Your father, Ruth said, wrapping both hands around her coffee cup, is discovering that a scheme that holds together when everyone stays quiet falls apart when one person decides they'd rather not go down with it. Which one broke? Eliza said. The Helena man. Apparently he didn't fully understand what he was signing when he incorporated that company. Or that's what he's telling the lawyer. Ruth raised an eyebrow. Whether that's true is between him and God. Eliza thought about her father. About the way he assembled people around him, always as instruments. Always assuming they would hold when needed. He had never understood that people who feel used eventually calculate whether the cost of loyalty outweighs the cost of walking away. She had understood that by the time she was 16. He'll try to manage it, Eliza said. He's trying, Ruth said. But managing a scheme when 3 parties are suddenly uncertain is a different business than building it in the first place. After Ruth left, Eliza went to find Caleb in the barn, she told him. He listened with his hands, still on what he'd been working on. The way he always listened without performing attention. Just actually paying it. The Helena man lawyering up, he said. That's the crack. Yes, she said. Your father's going to look for somewhere to redirect the pressure. Yes, she said again. I'd like to write a letter. To the county land commissioner directly. Laying out the full chain of what we know, the recording numbers. The Helena documents, the timeline. She looked at him. A formal accounting, before my father has the chance to reframe the narrative. Caleb looked at her. You know how to write that kind of letter, he said. I know how to write any kind of letter that requires precision and evidence and a clear argument, she said. I've been doing it in my head since October, he almost smiled. Fully this time. It crossed his face complete and unguarded, and she felt it like a change in the weather. Write it, he said. She wrote it that night after the children were in bed. At the kitchen table with the lamp turned up, the household accounts ledger open beside her, as reference. She wrote 3 drafts. The first was too long. The second was too careful in the wrong places, hedging where it should have been direct. Which her father had always said was a woman's weakness in written argument, and which she had spent 25 years proving was not a weakness but a strategy. And like all strategies was only a weakness when deployed incorrectly. The third was right. Precise, complete, factual, in the order that made the pattern undeniable. She read it over once. She brought it to Caleb in the morning. He read it at the kitchen table while she made the coffee. He read it slowly. He set it down. This is remarkable, he said. It's accurate, she said. Those aren't mutually exclusive. He looked up at her. Eliza, where did you learn to do this? 11 years of managing accounts nobody supervised, she said. When you're the only person watching the numbers, you learn to follow a chain of evidence all the way to its conclusion. She brought his coffee. My father never thought I was paying close enough attention to his business. He was wrong about that too. Caleb took the coffee. He held the letter. I want to add something, he said. She sat down. Add it. He thought for a moment, then. At the bottom, a paragraph. attesting to your role in uncovering this. By name. She looked at him. You should be on record, he said. Officially. What you found, what you documented, the timeline of what you brought to my attention. His voice was level. Not for sentiment. For record. You deserve to be on the record. She looked at the table for a moment. Nobody had put her on the record for anything in 25 years. Every piece of work she'd done, every problem she'd solved, every number she'd corrected had been absorbed into the household without attribution. The way water is absorbed into ground. All right, she said. He added the paragraph himself, in his own handwriting. At the bottom of her letter, she read it over his shoulder. It was plain and factual and complete, and it had her name in it 3 times. The letter went out the next day. The response came back in January. The county land commissioner, a man named Arthur Dean, whom neither of them had met, wrote back to say he was opening a formal inquiry into the Denton deed chain. He noted the recording evidence Eliza had compiled. He used her name. Jim Sellers wrote out personally to bring the letter. He handed it to Caleb and then looked at Eliza and said, Commissioner Dean asked me, who put the recording chain together? I told him. What did he say? Eliza said. He said he wished more people in this county paid that kind of attention to paperwork. Jim put his hat back on. I thought you'd want to know. After he left, Noah came in from wherever he'd been and saw his father's face and said, Good news? Caleb said.
Because of Eliza?
Caleb looked at his son. Yes, he said, because of Eliza. Noah looked at her. He nodded once, the slow, deliberate nod of someone confirming a conclusion they've been working toward for a while. Good, he said, and went back outside. Eliza stood in the middle of the kitchen and felt the particular strangeness of being thanked by people who meant it, which she was still learning how to receive without deflecting. It was February when Thomas came back. She didn't expect him. He came alone, no wagon, just a horse, and he tied it at the porch rail and stood outside for a moment before he knocked. She saw him through the window, saw him standing there in the cold with his hat in his hands and an expression she had never seen on his face before. She opened the door. He looked at her. He looked older than he had in November. Not in years, in something else. The particular aging that comes from watching something you believed in turn out to be wrong. Can I come in? He said. She stepped back. He came in. He stood in the front room without sitting. Father's lawyer withdrew, he said. I heard, she said. The Helena inquiry. He stopped. Started again. He's not going to recover from this one. The commissioner's inquiry is looking at 3 years of transactions. If they find what I think they're going to find, he stopped again. Thomas, she said. He looked at her. What did you come to say? He was quiet for a moment. He turned his hat in his hands, the same gesture he'd made in November. The gesture of a man who has rehearsed something and is uncertain whether to say it. I came to tell you I'm sorry, he said. Flat, plain. Without the softening she'd expected. She looked at him. I believed what he said about you, Thomas said, for a long time. I believed it because it was easier than looking at it closely. Because if you were what he said you were, then the way we treated you was just the way things were. He looked at the floor. And if you weren't what he said, then we were. He didn't finish that sentence. Then you were wrong, she said, quietly, without cruelty. And wrong people have to decide what to do about it. He looked up. I don't know how to fix it, he said. I don't think you can fix it, she said. I think you can just stop doing the things you were doing. That's all. You can't give back what's already spent. He nodded slowly. Are you all right? She thought about it. Yes, she said. I'm genuinely all right. You're happy here. I'm useful here in a way that's recognized. I'm respected. She paused. Yes, I'm happy. He looked around the room. At the order of it. At the small signs of a household that was working. A child's drawing tacked to the wall near the window. A pair of Lily's boots by the door neatly placed. the smell of something good coming from the kitchen. "Good," Thomas said. Roughly. "Good." He left without staying for coffee. She stood on the porch and watched him ride away, and felt something she hadn't expected, not triumph. Not satisfaction, not the vindication she might have imagined if she'd let herself imagine it. Just a quiet, clean feeling, like a window opened in a room that had been shut too long. Caleb found her still on the porch when he came in from the barn. "That was Thomas," she said. "I know. I saw him ride in." He stood beside her. "What did he want to apologize?" she said. Caleb was quiet. "Did it help?" he asked. She thought about it. "Somewhat," she said. "You can't unhear 25 years. But you can know someone saw it clearly." "Eventually. That helps a little." He nodded. They stood on the porch in the February cold and looked at the road where Thomas had gone. And the snow on the fields, and the sky above the hills going pink at the edges with the late afternoon. "Eliza." "Yes," she said. He turned toward her. She turned toward him. He said, "I have been trying to find the right time to say something for about 2 months, and I have concluded there isn't a right time, and I should simply say it." She waited. "When my wife died," he said, "I thought the part of my life that was about more than just keeping things going, I thought that part was finished. I wasn't looking for anything. I wasn't even looking." He held her gaze. "And then my children's father made a desperate arrangement with a man he shouldn't have trusted. And a woman showed up on his porch and asked 5 questions before she'd agreed to anything. And I thought she was remarkable. I thought she was the most careful, precise, honest person I had encountered in a very long time." She kept her eyes on his. "And then I watched her fix my fence and save my accounts, and face down her own father in my front room, and write a letter to the county commissioner. That was better than anything I could have written," he said. "And I stopped thinking she was remarkable, and started understanding that remarkable was not nearly the right word." The cold air moved between them. "What is the right word?" she said. Her voice was steady. She was proud of how steady it was. "I don't have it yet," he said. "But I want time to find it." With you paused. "I want to ask you to stay. Not because the ranch needs you. Not because the children need you. Because He stopped. Steadied himself. "Because I need you. Because I would like to spend whatever time I have learning the right word." She looked at him for a long moment. 25 years old. A tin of seeds. A ledger she'd taken because she'd earned it. A woman who had been told so long that she wasn't enough that she'd started to measure her own worth in what she could do rather than who she was. And this man, standing in the February cold, telling her he didn't know the right word yet and wanted time to find it. She thought, "That's the most honest proposal I've ever heard." She said, "I'm not going anywhere." He looked at her. Something in his face went very quiet, the good kind of quiet. "Is that a yes?" he said. She said. He didn't reach for her hand. He didn't make a grand gesture. He just nodded once. Slowly, the way he nodded when he was absorbing something true. And looked at her with that expression she'd been cataloging for months, the one she'd finally, recently understood was not surprise and was not assessment and was not even respect. Though it contained all of those. It was the way a person looks at something they have decided to keep. The door behind them burst open, and Lily appeared in it with both boots on and her coat half-buttoned. Clearly having been listening from inside for longer than either of them would have wanted to know. "Did you ask her?" Lily said to her father. Caleb looked at his daughter. "Were you listening at the door? Did she say yes?" Lily said. "Lily, Eliza," Lily said, turning to her with absolute urgency. "Did you say yes?" Eliza looked at the 7-year-old, and the 7-year-old looked back at her with those enormous dark eyes that had met her on the first day, with the same directness, the same complete absence of pretense. "Yes," Eliza said. "I said yes." Lily grabbed her hand with both of hers and held on. She didn't say anything else. She didn't need to. Noah appeared behind his sister in the doorway. He had clearly also been listening. He was doing an exceptional job of looking like he hadn't been. He looked at Eliza, with great dignity. That's good. He went back inside. Lily laughed and followed him. Caleb looked at the door they'd left open behind them. He looked at Eliza. His face did the thing it had been doing more often lately, the expression that went all the way to a smile. Complete unguarded, he said, before you freeze. She went inside. She went in through the door of the house that was starting, day by day, to feel like hers. She went in past Lily, who was already declaring that there needed to be a celebration, and Noah, who was already telling Lily that she didn't know what that word meant. And she went to the kitchen, and she lit the lamp, and she started supper. And Caleb came in behind her, and without saying anything poured them both coffee, the way she'd shown him stronger than he'd made it before, and set her cup on the counter, where she could reach it. She picked it up. She thought about a tin of seeds saved for 3 years against a future she couldn't name. She thought, there it is. There it finally is. The wedding was on a Saturday in late March, when the snow was still on the ground, but the light had changed that particular shift in Montana light, when the days start winning back minutes from the dark and everything feels like it is deciding to continue. Eliza had not wanted a large wedding. She had told Caleb this simply and without apology. The way she said most things. He had said that was fine by him. They had told Ruth Garrity, who'd taken charge of the practical arrangements with the focused energy of a woman who had been waiting for something to organize. The night before, Eliza sat at the kitchen table alone after the children were in bed, and Caleb had gone out to the barn for the last check on the animals. She sat with a cup of coffee she wasn't drinking, and she looked at the kitchen, her kitchen now. The word still new enough that she turned it over when it came to her, checking it from different angles the way you check a healed wound to see if it still hurts. It didn't hurt, it felt true. She heard Caleb come back in. She heard him stop in the hallway when he saw the lamp still lit. He came to the kitchen doorway. You should sleep, he said. I know, she said. I'm not worried. I'm just sitting with it. He came in and sat down across from her. He didn't have coffee, he just sat. Nervous? He said. No, she said. Then a little. Not about tomorrow, she looked at the table. About being happy. I'm not practiced at it. I keep waiting for it to cost something. He was quiet for a moment. It will cost something, he said. Everything real does. But not in the way you mean. She looked at him. You mean it'll be hard sometimes, she said. I mean it'll be real, he said. Hard and good and real. That's different from what you're afraid of. She looked at this man. This careful, honest, tired man who had stood up when she walked into a room and had not once, in the month since, made her feel like she needed to justify being there. I know, she said. I know the difference, She stopped. Still learning to trust it, he said. Yes, so am I, he said. Quietly. So am I. They sat in the kitchen in the late-night quiet, and the lamp burned between them, and that was enough. That was, Eliza thought, exactly enough. The morning of the wedding, Lily woke before everyone, which surprised nobody, and came to Eliza's room and knocked very softly, which surprised everyone. Come in, Eliza said. Lily came in and closed the door behind her with the careful deliberateness of someone conducting important business. She was still in her nightgown. Her hair was everywhere. She climbed onto the bed and sat cross-legged and looked at Eliza with those direct dark eyes. I want to tell you something, she said. Tell me, Eliza said. I prayed for you, Lily said. Before you came. I didn't know it was you. I just prayed that somebody would come who was real. She seemed to be working out the words as she went. Because some of the ladies who came to help before, they were nice enough, but they weren't real in the right way. They tried too hard, or they didn't try at all, or they looked at us like we were a problem they were solving. She looked at Eliza steadily. You never looked at us like that. Eliza held very still. How did I look at you, she said. Lily thought about it. Like we were just people that you wanted to know. She paused. Like we were worth knowing. The kitchen sounds had started up below them, Noah making his careful, clattering attempt at breakfast preparation. a thing he'd started doing on Saturdays, without being asked, and without acknowledging that he was doing it. "You are worth knowing," Eliza said. "Both of you." "Very much." Lily nodded, satisfied, like a matter that had been settled. Then she said, "I'm gonna call you Mama, if that's all right." Eliza's throat closed. She breathed through it. Once, twice. "It's all right," she said. Her voice held. She was proud of it. Lily climbed off the bed. She went to the door. She stopped with her hand on it, turned back with the timing of a child who has absolutely no idea how precisely she has just broken someone open in the best possible way. "Noah wants to also," Lily said. "He told me last night. He's just not going to say it first." She went out and closed the door behind her. Eliza sat on the edge of the bed and pressed both hands flat on her knees and breathed. She thought about the woman who had pressed her hands flat on a table to stop them shaking while her father sold her through a wall. Same hands, different reason. She got up. She got dressed. She went downstairs to the kitchen, where Noah had made a credible attempt at eggs and was pretending this was a completely ordinary morning. She looked at him across the kitchen. He looked back. Neither of them said anything. She took over the eggs before they burned. He stepped aside and let her. Their shoulders nearly touched as she moved past him, and he didn't step back the way he used to. The instinctive putting of distance that had taken weeks to unlearn. "Good start on these," she said. "They were fine," he said. "They were about 45 seconds from terrible," she said. He almost smiled. "You were watching?" "I was listening from the stairs," she said. "I know what eggs sound like when they're unhappy." He did smile then. Full unguarded, the smile that still arrived rarely enough that she noticed every time. "Morning," he said. "Morning, Noah," she said. The wedding was small. Ruth Garrity and Jim Sellers and his wife, two neighboring ranch families who had seen what Eliza had done for the Whitaker land and had formed their own opinions. Reverend Caldwell, who had looked troubled on the church steps in November and who had, in the month since, revised his assessment of the situation with the particular grace of a man who is honest enough to change his mind when evidence requires it. He had come to the ranch in January on his own, without prompting. He had sat at the kitchen table and drunk Eliza's coffee strong, as always, and he had said, "I owe you an apology for November," she had said. "I accept it." He had looked at her for a moment. "You're not going to make me explain myself further?" "No," she said. "You came, that's enough." He had nodded slowly. "Your father," he said, "is a man who has spent his life believing that what he says is what's true. That's a particular kind of blindness." "I know," she said. "It doesn't excuse him." "I know that too," she said. He had finished his coffee and left, and he had come back the following 2 Sundays. And by February he was stopping in on his rounds as naturally as Ruth did on her Tuesdays. He was the one who married them. The ceremony was short. Neither of them wanted long. Caleb held her hands and looked at her and said the words in a voice that didn't waver. And she said them back in hers, and when Reverend Caldwell said it was done, Lily burst into applause with the total commitment of someone for whom emotional restraint has never been a value. And Noah stood straight and serious, and then put his hand briefly on Caleb's arm just for a moment. Just a touch, and Caleb gripped his son's shoulder in return, and the two of them held that for a second before letting go. Ruth Garrity, Eliza noticed, was looking at the ceiling. Jim Sellers was blowing his nose. After, there was food in the kitchen and noise and the particular warmth of a house with people in it who are genuinely glad to be there. Eliza moved between the table and the stove and the conversations and felt, for the first time she could clearly remember, that she was in the center of something, instead of at the edge of it. It was Ruth who pulled her aside briefly near the window. "Your father got the inquiry ruling this week," Ruth said. Eliza went still. "What ruling?" "Commissioner Dean found 3 fraudulent transfers in the Denton chain. 2 of your father's partners have settled. Your father is being required to divest 2 parcels and pay restitution to a neighboring landowner he'd effectively cut off from creek access. Eliza absorbed this. He doesn't lose everything, Ruth said, but he loses enough. And the remaining partners, she paused. The scheme is finished. There's no recovering it. Eliza looked at the room. At Caleb talking to Jim Sellers with his shoulders loose. The posture of a man who is not bracing for anything. At Noah explaining something to one of the neighbor's children, with the serious authority of someone who knows a great deal about ranching and is not shy about sharing it. At Lily, who had appointed herself in charge of making sure everyone had enough pie and was executing this responsibility with military precision. How do you feel? Ruth said. Eliza thought about it. Settled, she said. Not triumphant, just settled. Ruth looked at her with those sharp, honest eyes. He's going to have to live with what he did, she said. That's more justice than most people get. Yes, Eliza said. It is. Ruth patted her hand once, briskly, the Ruth Garrity version of an embrace. You did well, she said, all of it. They didn't talk about it again that day. There were better things to talk about. The spring came, and with it the work of a ranch that had survived a hard winter and was ready to do more than survive. The barn roof got repaired in April. The Hargrove money finally applied to what it was needed for, stretching further than Caleb had expected, because Eliza had managed the purchasing with the same precision she managed everything. 2 neighbors came to help with the roof work and stayed for supper and left at dusk talking about the Whitaker Ranch. The people talk about a thing that has exceeded expectations. Eliza planted the kitchen garden in May. She planted it from the tin of seeds she had carried from her father's house. The ones she had been saving for 3 years against a future she couldn't name. She planted them in the ground of a ranch that was hers now. By law and by work and by the slow accumulation of every day she had chosen to be there. Noah worked alongside her. He had developed opinions about the garden, specific opinions. About which rows would get the best light, about the drainage on the east side. About what the previous planting had done to the soil quality. He delivered these opinions with the confidence of someone who has been paying close attention for months and knows it. You've been watching me work this ground since October, Eliza said. I've been watching the garden, he said, carefully. You've been watching me, she said, and the garden. Both. He was quiet for a moment. Then you never plant anything without knowing why it goes where it goes. No, she said. Papa used to just put things in the ground and hope, he said. That's not wrong, she said. Sometimes hoping is all you have. But knowing is better, knowing and hoping together, she said. That's the best. He thought about this. He drove a stake for the bean row. Mama, he said. It came out evenly, like a word he'd been carrying for a while, and had decided today was the day to set it down. Eliza kept her hands in the soil. Yes, she said. The south corner, he said. You put the squash there last year and it did well. We should do the same this year. Already planned for it, she said. He nodded. He moved down the row. She pressed her hands into the earth and breathed through the feeling in her chest that was too large for the space it was occupying and which she had no intention of hiding from. Because she had spent 25 years hiding from feelings in a house where feelings were liabilities. And she was done with that. She was absolutely permanently, irrevocably done with that. The summer brought a development that nobody in Willow Creek expected. Commissioner Dean's inquiry, in its final published findings, had named Eliza's documentary work explicitly the recording chain she assembled. The timeline she'd constructed, the letter she'd written that had given the inquiry its clearest single account of the scheme's architecture. The findings were public record. People in town read them. And then something began to happen that she hadn't anticipated and didn't know how to receive at first. People started coming to her. Not socially, not for pleasantries though, that had already shifted since the winter. Since the church steps in November, since Ruth Garrity's visible endorsement had done what visible endorsements from Ruth Garrity always did in Willow Creek. which was settle questions people had been sitting on the fence about. No, people came to her specifically. A woman named Clara Hennessy, whose late husband had left her a property with a deed dispute she didn't understand. Two brothers named Park, who believed a surveying error from 15 years ago had been cutting their grazing access by a third and couldn't afford a lawyer to prove it. An elderly rancher named Walt Gibbs, who had been paying a water fee for 6 years that he'd been told was legally required, and which Eliza, looking at his documents for 45 minutes one afternoon, determined was not legally required and had never been. She charged Walt Gibbs nothing. She wrote a letter to the water district on his behalf that got the fee reversed within 3 weeks and got him a refund for 18 months of overpayment, which was all the statute of limitations allowed, but which was, Walt said with his hat in both hands and something glittering in his old eyes, more than he'd expected to ever see again. Caleb watched this develop through the summer with an expression that she was learning to read quiet, considering the look of a man who is watching a thing become what it was always going to be and is moved by it in a way he isn't going to perform. One evening in August, after the children were in bed and the day's work was done, and they were sitting on the porch in the warm dark the way they'd taken to sitting on summer evenings, he said, "You should charge for what you do." "I'm helping neighbors," she said. "You're doing skilled work," he said, "document analysis, legal research, letter writing that gets results. That's not charity." Eliza. She looked at the dark yard. "People here don't have money for lawyers," she said. "No," he said, "but some of them have money for someone who can read a deed chain and write a letter that works. And the ones who don't," he paused, "help them anyway. But the ones who can pay, let them. You've earned the right to be paid for what you know." She thought about this. "My father always said a woman's knowledge was worth set in the market than a man's," she said. "Your father," Caleb said, "paid 2 years of fraudulent supplier fees because he didn't have someone like you checking his accounts." He looked at her. "His opinion on the market value of your knowledge is not the one I'd consult." She almost laughed. She did laugh, actually a short, real, surprised laugh that came out before she could be dignified about it. "All right," she said. "All right," he said. It was not all smooth. It was not all resolution and warmth and things working out. Because life on a working ranch in Montana in the 1880s was not smooth. And Eliza had never been interested in pretending otherwise. There was a hard week in September when a disease moved through 3 of the neighboring herds, and the fear of it reaching Whitaker cattle kept both her and Caleb up for 4 nights running, making checks, monitoring, doing the slow, anxious work of waiting to know. The cattle came through clean, but the 4 nights left them both worn to the edge. And on the 5th morning they had their first real argument, not about the cattle, not about anything significant, about a supply order Eliza had adjusted without telling him. A small thing that became a larger thing because they were both exhausted and fear that has nowhere else to go has to go somewhere. It was sharp. It was brief. It said things that were not quite fair. She went to the kitchen and stood at the window and pressed her hands flat on the counter. He came in 10 minutes later. "I should told you about the order," she said. Before he could speak. "I should have asked, before assuming the worst," he said. At the same time, they looked at each other. "I'm not used to consulting," she said. "I ran things alone for 11 years. I forget sometimes. I'm not used to sharing the decisions," he said. "I ran this ranch alone for 18 months. I get defensive when things change without my knowing. We're both bad at it," she said. "We're both learning," he said. She thought about Eleanor. About a woman who had been honest in ways that were sometimes painful, and who Caleb had loved for 30 years and missed every day, and who had, apparently, also fought with him sometimes, because that was what real marriage was, not the absence of friction, but the willingness to stay in the room after it. "I'll tell you about the orders," she said. "I'll ask before I assume," he said. She turned back to the window. He came to stand beside her. Outside, Noah was crossing the yard toward the barn with a purpose. She recognized something needed doing, and he decided to do it without waiting to be asked. Which was, she thought, the best thing a person could be. "He's going to be extraordinary," Caleb said. "He already is," she said. From upstairs, Lily's voice descended at full volume, apparently in conversation with herself or the ceiling about a matter of great urgency involving a missing hair ribbon. "She's going to be something else entirely," Caleb said. "She's going to be magnificent," Eliza said. He looked at her. "Yes," he said. "She is." The inquiry's final findings were published in October. A full year after Eliza had first heard the name Denton, spoken in whispered tones around her father's house. Henry Monroe paid his restitution in November. Thomas wrote Eliza a letter, not a long one. Not a letter that tried to do more than it could, that said he had settled some accounts of his own, was leaving the county for work in the East, and hoped she was well. She wrote back. She said she was well. She said she hoped he'd find what he was looking for. She said she didn't hate him. She meant all of it. She put the letter in the outgoing mail and did not wait at the window watching the road afterward. She went to the garden instead. October in Montana is the end of things, the last of the harvest, the putting to bed of the soil, the work of preparing ground for a future planting you won't see for months. She knelt in the dirt of the kitchen garden that had been half dead when she arrived and was now, by every measure she knew how to apply, thriving. She worked through the row with her hands in the cold earth and her mind quiet, for once not cataloging, not calculating, just present in the way you can only be present when you are somewhere you chose and are choosing again every day. She heard the gate. Lily came through it at a run. Coat unbuttoned, hat already lost somewhere on the journey between the house and here, which was a distance of approximately 40 yards. "Mama," Lily said, "Noah says supper's ready." "Tell Noah 5 more minutes," Eliza said. "He said you'd say that," Lily said. "He says to tell you the biscuits are already getting cold. Tell him I know how the biscuit stays warm and 5 minutes is within the margin." Lily considered this. "I'm not sure I can say all those words in the right order. Tell him Mama says 5 minutes." Lily's face did the thing it did when she was pleased, the particular brightness that came from somewhere so central in her that it couldn't be contained in just one expression. "Okay," she said. She ran back across the yard. Eliza stayed in the garden for her 5 minutes. She thought about a woman who had pressed her hands flat on a table to stop the shaking. She thought about a suitcase and a ledger she'd earned and a tin of seeds she'd saved. She thought about a man who had stood up when she walked into a room and had not once in a year given her reason to regret that she'd noticed. She thought about 2 children who had taught her, in their completely different and completely certain ways, that belonging was not a thing you were given, it was a thing that grew slowly out of showing up every day and doing the real work. She looked at the garden, at the turned earth, and the cleared rows and the work of preparation for a planting she would be here to see. She was 26 years old. She had a husband who told her the truth and asked for it in return. She had a son who called her Mama in the same tone he used for things he was sure of. She had a daughter who ran between the house and the garden, treating 40 yards like it was a journey worth running, and Eliza herself like she was worth running toward. She had a ranch that carried her name now alongside his in the county record. She had a tin of seeds in the ground. She stood up. She brushed the dirt from her hands. She walked back to the house where the lamp was lit and the biscuits were warm, and 3 people were waiting for her because she was the person they came home to. She opened the door. 5 minutes, Noah said, without looking up from where he was already pouring water at the table. That was 7. The last 2 were thinking time, she said. Does thinking time count? Always. She hung her coat. She washed her hands. She sat down at the table in the kitchen of the house that was hers. At the table with the man she had chosen and the children who had chosen her back. And she looked at the faces of the people she loved in the warm light of a lamp she had lit herself. She thought they called her the daughter nobody wanted. They were wrong about that from the first day. She was the woman who knew exactly what she was worth. She had simply been waiting for the people who were worth telling.